Hi guys, I'm going to be going over the steps to make a chunky knit pillow. So we of course have our 12 by 12 inch pillow insert, and here I have a skein of my chunky chenille yarn. So yarn beat is my favorite type of yarn to use for this project. So we are going to start off with a slip knot. So go ahead, find the end of your yarn and create this upside down U shape. So we have our shorter end over on the right. We're going to take the shorter end, cross it over so that the shorter end is on top. Hold down the loose end, reach your hand through and behind that loop, reach over and grab the longer piece of yarn and pull it through to create this slip knot. So we want to tighten that up by pulling on the loose end, pulling on the loop. That'll tighten that knot up. And now we want to pull on these two ends until this loop slips down to about this size. So I say about a 3-finger size. You know, it's about 2 to 3 inches, that loop. You're gonna have a tail, and here's my longer piece. This is my working yarn, and we are gonna get set up to make our first row. So I like to place my first loop over here on the left, toss my tail over to the side, and just have this yarn all laid out in front of me. And to make this first row, it's gonna be a chain. So find your first loop, take 2 fingers into the top of that first loop and grab the working yarn and pull it through. So that will create the second loop in your chain, which you want to be the same size. And when you have that loop, just kind of lay it down to the right. Make sure your working yarn is always coming out of the bottom half of your loop, and move on to the next loop. So do the same exact thing. Pull the yarn through that second loop to create your third loop. Same thing, pull the yarn through, create loop number 4. So notice that it's growing from left to right as I add more loops on. And we are going to continue doing this until we have the width of this pillow. So try to keep everything nice and flat on your surface, wherever you're working, your table, the floor like me. Do a couple more. So right now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And you want to make sure you don't go too big. You don't want your pillow to be too loose. So I'm going to stop right about 8. You know, it kind of depends on how tight you're making these loops. But I am going to stop right at about 8. Because there's going to be a little stretch to this. All right. So my first row is done. And now I'm going to move on to this second row. And I want to take my skein and place it down on the opposite side now. And just have all my working yarn laid out underneath here. So my working yarn should be coming out of the bottom here. And I want you to find all these little bottom parts of each loop from row 1. So each of those little bottom parts, we are going to move and pull the yarn through to create these little bunny ear loops that are going to kind of stick out of the bottom of every loop. So there was one, and move to the left, find the next open loop, pull through, there's number 2. Move to the left, find the next one. And all these loops I'm making, try to keep them all that same size. Moving down, pulling through. Now the good thing about these videos is you can always pause them, go back and see how that was done. But for every loop I made in row 1, I just pulled one of these little upside down bunny ear loops through, so they're all facing me. I'm going to keep this where it is, but once you finish pulling through all of these loops on the bottom, we are going to take our skein, place it over on the right side now. I always like to pull some loose yarn out so I don't have to tug on that skein the whole time. But now I'm getting ready to knit all of these loops on the top part of that first row. So we just knit the bottom row. Now we're going to knit the loops on the top of that first row. So go ahead, here's my working yarn, by the way. It kind of went over my tail, so try to ignore your tail for now. But I have it set up just like this so that you can easily see this is the first loop I want to pull through. So I'm going to reach underneath, keep it nice and snug, and pull my first loop through. So there's number 1. Here's number 2. And just keep moving to the right and doing the same thing through each of these loops. And here's the last one. So this one can get a little confusing. Right here. So ideally you want to make sure that every loop on the top has a matching partner on the bottom. 2, 3, 4, there, and there. Perfect. So this bottom and top row, that is a finished second row. So every time we do a full rotation around, that's another completed row. So moving on, we are going to do that same thing now. Take our skein, place it over on the opposite side. And now I'm going to knit through all of these nice big loops we have. So starting with the first one on the bottom right, pulling through, trying to keep it, nice and snug. We don't want to have too much loose yarn when we pull that first loop through. There's number 1. Move to the right, find that next loop, pull through, and work all the way down to the left. And once I finish this bottom row, I just want to make sure I didn't miss any. So that looks good. And now I'm going to move my way to the top. So I take my skein, move to the other side, and now I can start knitting all these. So starting from right up here. Again, we want to make sure it's nice and snug. So I don't want to go like this and leave all of this loose yarn. So I want to make sure I'm keeping it nice and tight when I pull that first loop through. So now I'm just moving to the right through all these loops on the top part of this row. Okay. So starting to get bigger. All right. I'm going to do this one more rotation before I change things up. So I'm going to place my skein over here and do the same thing over again. So starting back down here with this one right here, pull my first one through, second one through, third one, and all the way to the end. So just to clarify, we just did 3 rows around. I'm about to finish my 3rd go around, and then it's going to get a little different after this. So don't get too comfortable with this, because after this we need to fold this in half so that we can get the pillowcase shape that we're looking for. All right, so that is 3 rotations completed. And what we're going to do now, like I said, is fold this in half. So if you can find that middle row, or that first row we made, which should be right in the middle, we are going to take this bottom half and fold it underneath this top half. So watch how I do that slowly. Again, you can always pause and rewind and watch this over again, but what we're doing is taking this bottom half and folding it underneath the top half. So it's a little fragile right now, so we want to be super careful with it. But basically, I just want to line all these loops up with each other. All right, once you have it folded in half, we're now gonna pancake flip this over so that our working yarn is on the left side. So taking this whole thing, flipping it over like this, trying to keep everything folded in half. All right, so we should have 2 rows of loops. We have this top row right here and this bottom row. For this next step, we're going to focus just on this top row of loops right here, so the ones that are closest to me. And we will take our working yarn and knit through each of these loops on this row. So it's kind of falling apart right now, but as we add a couple rows on, it should be able to stay without it falling apart. But let's start knitting from this first loop here on the left, pulling my loops through now. So all these little bunny ears we make, they're all going to just be connected to each of these loops just from the row that is closest to me. So I'm not knitting the bottom row. We're doing one side at a time now. And when I get to the end of this row, I'm going to flip it over and knit the other side. All right, so I just knit this side. Once I'm done with that, I flip it over. So just kind of picture like a pancake flipping over completely. And now I'm going to knit this side. So this is the side that was underneath before. But let's start from the left. Find that first loop on the left. Pull your yarn through for your next set of loops. Working all the way to the right. All right, so that's another row completed. And we just keep doing the same thing over, so a lot of repetition now. Take the whole thing, flip it over, and knit this side again. So you're always just knitting one side at a time from left to right. Every time you flip it over, you just start that over from the top. So now it's starting to get a little more stable, that I don't have to hold it down. So as we add more and more rows on, it will start to get a little more sturdy. So just flipped it over. Gonna knit this side now from left to right. And I will continue doing this until I get to the length of my pillow, or the height of my pillow. So it's going to take a little bit of work. Feel free to fast forward through this once you kind of get it down. But again, a lot of repetition, so have some fun with it. Hopefully you can get in a little groove, but you just want to always make sure you don't miss any. If you need to pull out a row, if you do miss one or something looks off from a couple rows back, it's always best to just go back and try it again. So you can see as I am knitting these rows, it's getting bigger and bigger, of course. So this pocket that I'm creating is getting deeper and deeper, and eventually I'll be able to stuff that pillow insert in. And this is just a 12 by 12 pillow. So say you wanted to make an even bigger pillow. Now you can get more yarn and make this a longer pillow. If you want to make one of those body pillows, that's always fun. Okay, getting close to what looks like it could be one of my final rows. So again, we are knitting until we get to the height of the pillow. So after this row, maybe one more row, I might stuff the pillow insert in and see how it looks. Okay. Stuff that in. I might have to add one more. Let's see how that looks. Just be gentle. Don't want any of your loops to fall out. All right, so let's see. Yeah, I might add one more row because I don't want it to stretch too much. So it's a little awkward with the pillow in here already, but I'm gonna take my working yarn and knit this side. And knit one more on this side. Okay, so I just want to see and make sure that all of my loops can kind of match up at the top. So as long as you can kind of squish the pillow in and match them up, then you are good to go for the next step, which is to close this end off. Okay, so I got my pillow stuffed in there. First thing you want to do is make sure you have enough yarn to finish off. So I was able to get through this pillow with just one skein. If you need to tie on more yarn, you can always do that. Again, it's just a simple double knot and trim off the excess pieces if you do have to add more yarn on. So I always want to make sure I have at least 3 widths of my pillow worth of yarn left, and I can trim it from there. So I actually have quite a bit extra, so I'm gonna just trim off again at 3 widths. So there's 1, 2, 3. I don't like having too much extra yarn because it kind of is a pain to have so much extra, but basically the rest of this yarn is going to be our sewing thread to close up this edge. So what I'm gonna do is turn my pillow around so that I can see all of the loops facing me. And from here, try to get this in the camera angle a little better. So from here we have our loops on the bottom, which are down here, and this loops on the top over here. What I want to do is take these 2 loops that are on the edge. So again, you want to make sure you have your pairs that you can identify there, but just find the last loop you made, which is right here, and the one that's directly next to it. So here's my working yarn coming out of the edge. Take those 2 loops around your finger. I'm going to pull this loop a little bit tighter. Take the end of your strand of yarn and we're going to thread it through the top of these 2 loops. So pushing it through those 2 loops and pulling it fully through. Okay, once we have that pulled through, we're going to flip this pillow over right here. So I can see these loops here. And what I'm going to do now is I want to show you, try to get a good view of it. If you can see, there's a little row for every time we made a new loop. And there's a little V shape. So all these little V shapes. And that really helps me with this next step, because what I'm doing is taking this open loop and the other half of this loop here to create that little V shape down at the bottom. So I want to connect these 2 by holding this side of the V and this loop, which is the other side of the V, and taking my yarn and stringing it through from right to left, pulling it through to connect that V shape. So that is our first V, and now I want to flip it over and connect the V on this side. So find the left side of this V here. So this is the next open loop. So I know this left half of the loop is going to be the right side of that V. So I want you to find the left side of that V, which is this loop here. Take your working yarn. So make sure your finger is looped around and pull it through. So stringing it through like that will connect that V at the bottom. All right, once you have that, you flip it over again. And now we do the same thing for our next V. So here's my next little V section. This is going to be the left side of the V right here. And this half of this loop is going to be the right side of the V. So it's a little tight because we pulled it back when we made our first V. So you just want to find this piece. Take those 2 edges of the V and then string your yarn through from right to left. Pull it all the way through. So every time you finish a V, you flip it over and you do your next one. So here's my next one. This is going to be the right side of the V, and this one here is the left side. So string the yarn through from left to right and pull it through and flip. So again, here's my next V section. Here's the right side, here's the left side. String it through and pull. So I'm gonna keep flipping this and repeating for every column, I guess you would call. Flip. Here's my next one. Pull it through. And you can see this one fell out, so I'm just gonna correct that. Flip. So here is my next one. Getting closer to the edge, so got a couple more to go. Here's the edge. Here's the V. Pull it through. And let's see, is this my last one? So here's that last loop. This is going to be the right side of the V, the left side of the V. Pull it together and string it through. Okay. All right. So once you have that, we now just have to tie a little knot off, and that's kind of why I love this fluffy yarn. Is, you know, you don't have to do too much work when it comes to hiding your knot because it's very fluffy, so it's going to kind of blend in. So I just like to find a place. You can either tie a knot just on this last loop that you made. So I think I'm just going to do that. I'm going to string the tail back through that last loop and then pull it back through itself and tie that knot. Okay, and once you have it tied, you can just trim your tail. My tail's pretty long right now, but I want to save a little bit of the tail and tuck it back into the pillow. So once you have that, just kind of push it inside somewhere. And same for your tail from the beginning. So if you want to just trim it up a little bit and just tuck it into the pillow somewhere. And then you can adjust your work if you want to try to hide any of those gaps. If you want it to be a little tighter knit, you can make your loops a little bit smaller. But that is our chunky knit pillow. So cute. All right, you guys. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you in a future workshop one day.